Hello, hello. I'm so happy to see so many people on this call already. My name is Ashley Garcia. I am the NASM instructor for Show Up Fitness, and this is our level 0 program. So what that means, if you are brand new, we help you pass your NASM certification, your textbook certification rather quickly. And then we teach you in our level 1 how to program, how to learn anatomy, how to build a book of business, and to get your resumes ready for the industry, how to interview. But the number one thing that I talk to people all about and that they send me messages about, they're like, Ashley, okay, I'm certified now, but I don't know how to program. I don't know how to train people. And that's what our program helps you do. We specialize in helping you become certified and then qualified and knowledgeable in the industry. So welcome to the call. Today, we are going to be going over the OPT model and the progressions and regression exercises that you are probably going to see on your NASM exam. So I know this stuff can feel very complicated and overwhelming, and it's because what NASM wants you to do is it wants you to take the online portal curriculum. It wants you to read every single chapter, take every single quiz, watch every single video, and that's really difficult to do. Not only is it difficult to do in a short period of time, but you're not getting hands-on, one-on-one training on any of this. Not to mention, a lot of this is based on the physical therapy approach to postural movement and postural stability. So you're going to see a lot of encouragement to do things on Bosu balls, single leg exercises, neuromuscular control, which is great if you have injury, right? It's very much a physical therapy approach to getting stronger. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Some of the stuff in the NASM book has been scientifically debunked. So that's why when you see me talk about, according to NASM, that's what that means. It's not that we're knocking NASM, we're not. We just want you to know the difference between the two. And so NASM has certain language nuances that they use for overactive, underactive muscles. They're going to call them short and tight. They're going to call the hip flexors the psoas major. You're never going to see that anywhere else. Okay. They'll call a plank a prone iso ab. You're not going to see that anywhere else. So we kind of pull back the curtain a bit on the way that NASM talks so that you're going to be prepared to take the exam. This is a multiple choice exam. I took the proctored version, and that was a very good experience for me because it was a controlled environment. And so if you are looking for tips on how to take the exam, we let you know how to eliminate the wrong answers, look at what the question's actually asking you, and then filling in all the details. Because some of those questions that they're going to ask you are really long, and don't let them trip you up. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help you pass so you feel confident going into it. Don't second guess yourself. When you are taking that multiple choice exam, if you have studied the topics that we go over, the most important topics to pass, and you spend enough time memorizing those things and what we tell you to memorize, you're going to see the right answer. Your gut is going to tell you what it is. Don't second guess yourself. I highly recommend not going back and changing answers after you've changed or after you have answered the question. And then in the exam, bookmark the questions that you're not quite sure about, answer them, all of those bookmark ones at the very end. So that's going to give you a lot of confidence to move through the exam quickly. We have a lot of people that study with us at Show Up Fitness. We've helped over 4,600 people pass this thing in a relatively short period of time. I was just like you. I got an elite bundle. I spent 6 months trying to read the book. I only got through chapter 5, and I was so overwhelmed. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to pass this thing. And so I started looking for help online. How do I pass NASM? I found Show Up Fitness. We have a YouTube channel. We have a free podcast. That is what I listened to. I got the study guide. I studied only those things. And in 2 weeks, I passed after getting that study guide. So that's been my personal experience. And since I have been with Show Up Fitness, I have taken my virtual coaching certification with NASM. I have taken my nutrition certification and passed with NASM. I have taken the balance certification with them and just passed that. And I'm going through these things just like you guys are. So I'm familiar with the testing style and I'm walking your path with you. Okay. So let's get to the topic at hand. First of all, in the chat while we're talking and I'm going over some of these things, I would love it if you guys would put in the chat where you're tuning in from, what your name is, and how you heard about Show Up Fitness and the Level Zero. Some of you are on here because I invited you today and I'm so happy to see you. And some of you might have heard about us through the podcast or through YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. So we would love to know where you're hearing from us and what your names are. And then while we're going through the questions, if you guys have a specific question, put it in the chat. And at the end, after I cover progressions and regressions and the OPT model, if we have time, we'll go over them. So, oh, I'm so happy to see you guys on here. Some of you are preparing for your ACPT. Some of you heard about it through Facebook. Show Up Fitness on YouTube. I love to see it. Welcome, welcome. Okay. So can anybody, and answer in the chat if you want, or you can unmute, what does the OPT model stand for? Brandon says optimum performance training model. Yes, very good. Okay, so there's different ways that NASM tells you how you need to train clients. They call them resistance training modalities. And so you have strength training machines, and they give the pros and cons of that. They talk about free weights and then the risks of both. They want you to be aware of what that looks like for a client so that when you start taking them through periodization, meaning when you're programming for a client, according to NASM, you can either train them weekly, monthly, or annually, and they call those three specific things. Do you know what the weekly is? The weekly programming method, according to NASM, what is that called? That's called a microcycle. The monthly, do you know what the monthly programming method is called? Mesocycle. Yes, very good. And then what is the annual? Macrocycle. Yeah, absolutely. So they also talk about linear versus undulating. So linear is a traditional method of program design that aims to gradually increase the intensity of the training load while simultaneously decreasing volume over a set period of time. So knowing some of these key terms like the training plan, the acute variables, and what periodization even means, it's basically the macro management or planned manipulation of training variables in an organized fashion. So if that's like, woo, all these words over your head, that is why you need this thing. Some of you already have this. This is the NASM Show Up Fitness cheat sheet. This narrows down all of the key terms and basically the things that you need to know to pass this thing. If you don't have that, then I want you to reach out to me and I can send you that. The only thing we ask is that you go listen to one of our episodes on the podcast, you rate it if it was helpful to you after you listen to it, and then send me a screenshot and I will send you this cheat sheet for free. I think this is like a $50 or $60 value and you get it for free just for listening to the podcast, which only helps you, right? So that's periodization. We also have resistance training systems. That's going to pop up more when we start talking about the OPT model. So for example, horizontal loading versus vertical loading, that's part of what you're going to want to focus on. What's a superset? A drop set? What are these training methods? And so within the OPT model, you are going to want to memorize all of the acute variables around the resistance portion of the OPT model. So the definition of acute variable, if you're totally brand new and you haven't done any studying or have any experience in fitness, it determines the specific demands placed on the body over the course of exercise training. So when applied during an exercise program, the acute variables dictate these demands and the adaptations achieved. So what does that mean? You're going to know when I start listing off these acute variables, but I want to know what you guys think acute variables are. What are some of the acute variables within the OPT model? Rest. Yep. Reps. Sets. Yep. What else? Tempo. Intensity. And so you'll also see NASM talk about rest intervals or training volume, the training frequency, the training duration, the exercise order or the exercise selection. So when we get to progressions and regressions, let's say you have a client that comes in that's totally hungover and you've wrote out this whole program for them and they're like, oh, I don't feel good. Or let's say that you have somebody come in and you're in a gym environment and then the equipment that you planned on using is totally booked up. Are you just going to stand there for 15, 20 minutes till the equipment opens up? No, you have to be able to progress and regress. And NASM has very specific exercises that they say are progressions and regressions. With Show Up Fitness, we teach you to progress and regress the movement patterns. So the movement patterns are horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, squat, hinge, unilateral, and transitional patterns. We call them the core movement patterns, but we're not talking about your abs. We're talking about the main movement patterns that you are going to be able to progress and regress a client based on the environment and based on their goals. So you'll learn more about that later. But for NASM specific purposes, you want to know the progressions and regression. Well, that is a mouthful. The progressions and regressions in the OPT model. And so we're going to go over that in a bit. Yes, Nikki, intensity as well. And Brandon, you said, wait, but when you think of training volume, that's the way that you would see it for NASM. Okay. So within the OPT model, how many phases do we have? You have 5 phases, right? And who can name them for me? What's phase 1? Stabilization. What's number 2? Close, Susan. You're very close. Instead of stability endurance, it's strength endurance. And then what's the 3rd? Muscular endurance, AKA what's the other name for muscular endurance? Hypertrophy. Yep, you got it. What's number 4? Max strength. And number 5? Yes, exactly. So you have rest, reps, sets, tempo, duration, intensity, and whether it's vertical loading or horizontal loading. And those are the acute variables that you are going to want to know for the CPT test. So the acute variables and the ones that you need to memorize are actually on this cheat sheet. I did see somebody ask, you got the level 0, now how do you get the study guide? Anilu, you're going to want to email info@showupfitness.com and say, please send me the study guide. If you don't hear back within a few days, message me directly. You can email me, Ashley@showupfitness.com, or you can reach out on Facebook or Instagram and ask me for help. Okay. So in stabilization, what is the tempo? 4211. In the 7th edition, it's 4211. Do any of you know what 4211 represents? So I'll give you an example. Think of your biceps. When you curl, you have elbow flexion, right? And so the biceps are concentrically accelerating, and coming down is eccentric. Pausing is isometric. So Brandon said 4-second eccentric, 2-second isometric, hold at the bottom, 1-second concentric, 1-second isometric at the top. Yep, very good. So in the 6th edition, they didn't have the second one. So they added that for the 7th edition, which, it's not exactly how I would train, but okay. What are the reps? $12 to $20, yes. So these are things that you're definitely going to just want to memorize. And the way that I memorized the OPT model, I was trying to put everything on one chart and remember everything for stabilization at once. I'm like, okay, duration, 4 to 6 weeks, reps, 12 to 20, 4-2-1-1 tempo, 1 to 3 sets, 50 to 70% intensity, 0 to 90 seconds rest. And I was getting all these numbers jumbled in my head. Can anybody relate to that? So here's how you're going to want to memorize this. Where are my flashcards? Get a flashcard out and put 12 to 20 reps. And then on the other side, put stabilization and phase 1. And then that way you will memorize the exact reps the exact reps for that phase. So if you get a question on the exam and they say, what is the correct reps for someone who is in the stabilization endurance phase while doing a single leg, whatever, then you're going to be like, oh, boom, I know it. And you can always tell if somebody is ready for the test or not, because they automatically can just regurgitate these answers. So Brandon, I can tell someone who has studied, unless you just have your notes out in front of you. That's cheating, but just kidding. It's not cheating. All right. But that's how you know that you're ready. So phase 1, horizontal loading or vertical loading, which one? So vertical loading, you have exercises performed in rapid succession, and it starts with upper body and it works down the body. Horizontal loading is performing all sets of an exercise or body part before moving on to the next exercise. So phase 1, they actually say it's vertical loading. And knowing the difference between the two is helpful so you don't get confused. And that's another one that you would flashcard. Phase 1 stabilization endurance. Phase 1 stabilization endurance is vertical loading. And that's what you would put. You're going to have a lot of flashcards. You just are. But it's so much better than trying to read the book from beginning to end. Because the way that NASM defines their terms, they keep defining the terms over and over and over throughout the book. Did you guys get the book and see? They they would bring up neuromuscular efficiency over and over and over and over again. Suddenly you're like, why do I have 4 flashcards that define neuromuscular efficiency? You're like, it's totally confusing. So if you do it this way, it's so much better and easier for you to just know right off the back that, okay, phase 1, 12 to 20 reps. Phase 1, 0 to 90 second rest. And that's how you can memorize the acute variables, okay? So one thing that they want in phase 1 is to correct muscle imbalances and to strengthen ligaments and tendons before loading anything up. And so you'll learn through the overhead squat assessment that when you take a client through the overhead squat assessment, you're going to be able to analyze from a front and side view, what kind of syndromes that they have, right? I would never tell a client that they have a distortion syndrome. Okay, that just scares them. We wouldn't train them that way, but you knowing what they are is helpful, because then when NASM asks you on the exam what kind of training and phase that should be in the OPT model, you know where to place them. So this is their version of programming for a client. All right. So phase 2. Can anybody tell me what phase 2 is again? Strength endurance. Yes. So the way that you are going to be able to recognize strength endurance is through supersets, right? So you're going to have strength to stability. So you might see a bench press to a push-up, a squat to a single leg squat. You're going to have supersets back to back with a moderate or slow tempo. You might see them take you into a military press, into a scaption, a squat into a step up. And so those are some examples, a pull up into a single arm cable row. And so this is strength followed by stabilization. And the reason I'm going to kind of go through these a little bit quicker is because I want to actually get to the progressions and regressions. That is the topic for today's call, but I did want to go over a few of these things about the OPT model, so you're not like, how are these related? How are they? This is jumbling up in my mind. We're clearing out the confusion here with this. Okay, so what's the next one? Phase 3. Yep, very good. Muscular development or hypertrophy. And so what is the tempo for this one? 2020. Very good. How many sets? It's 3 to 6. Very good, Susan. Yep. And then how many reps? There you go, Diane Ellis. 6 to 12. Good. And then what kind of loading? Horizontal loading or vertical loading? Horizontal. Yep. Because you're trying to get bigger. Hypertrophy, right? What's the intensity? $75 to $85 out of 5. Very good. 75 to 85%. And then what is the rest? $0 to 60. There you go. So you might have noticed, if you have the book, if you go back and look at the very back of the book at some of the resistance training models of program examples, that the rest in reps and sets doesn't exactly match what they have in the curriculum part of the book. What we think happened is we think that they were rushing through finishing the 7th edition to try to roll that out. And they weren't necessarily thinking about what would a client actually do in this situation and double checking their work. So we have what I told you is correct. Take it for what it is on the cheat sheet and our study guide, the Show Up Fitness study guide, because we have it correct. So a little frustrating, I know, when you're like, but this is the book, this is the curriculum they gave us, but doesn't exactly match what they say in the chapter. So trust the cheat sheet. I know, Brandon's laughing. Trust us. Okay, so the last one, no, 4th one. This is the stage that's for optimizing rate of force production. What is it called? 4th phase. Max strength. Yep. This is horizontal loading. What's the tempo? X, 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 X. Yes. And what does that stand for? Explosive. Very good. Nikki's been studying. Okay, how many sets? 3 to 5. Yep. And then how many reps? It's actually 1 to 5 reps. 3 to 5 minute rest. And what's the intensity? Yep, 85 to 100. You're right, Susan. Just think explosive, right? That would be 100%. So last one before we move to progressions and regressions. Power. Very good. So it's supersets, kind of like phase 2, but it's strength followed by power. You're going to have horizontal loading. It's going to be very explosive, right? So how many sets do you have in power? Almost. It's not 2 to 6 sets, it's 3 to 6 sets. And then how many reps? It's 1 to 10. So, Jasmine, like you were saying, 1 rep max. It could be 1, it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 10. So, but that range of reps is 1 to 10. And then your rest period, how many minutes? It's 3 to 5. Yeah, Nikki got it. 3 to 5 minutes. And so your intensity is 85% to 100. And then for your second exercise, it's 30 to 45% or 10% of the body weight. So just remember, if you see NASM during the exam talking about supersets, you have to look at the intensity to know whether it's phase 2 or phase 5. Okay. The power phase is important for optimizing rate of force production and explosiveness. So if you see jump exercises that are very explosive, you're going to know that that is in power. So it's important to know. Brandon says this model makes absolutely no sense. I know. But again, we're not trying to dog NASM. We just want to help you identify what they mean by it and you memorize it. And then you can use the book as, a coffee coaster later, or something that looks nice on, your bookshelf. But what you really want to do is learn the core movement patterns and then take the client's goals and do a CCA pattern. So a CCA way of programming is core movement pattern, accessory, and doing supersets like that according to the capabilities that you assess them in during the warm up and that initial assessment, which should take no longer than 10 minutes, guys. Like, come on. But of course, we want to know what the PAR-Q is, especially if you're going to get hired in a gym or work environment that requires it. We are in the process of becoming accredited. Accreditation, NASM is an accredited program. All that means is that their processes of testing have quality control built in by that accreditation company. It doesn't evaluate the actual content to make sure that it's science-backed and truthful and makes sense. Okay, so a lot of gym owners might say, oh, well, I don't want to hire any trainers that don't have an accredited CPT certification. And we're like, Okay, but they don't evaluate the actual content of the program itself. So how do you know that it's quality? Just because you're accredited doesn't mean that your program is quality. And just because you're not accredited doesn't mean that your program isn't quality. So anybody who goes through the accreditation process, they spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it is anywhere from 1 to 5 year approval process. So good on NASM. They have huge funding behind them, and they are a great marketing company. They know how to market this and buy for the search results on Google when you type in what is the highest quality fitness certification, and NASM pops up. Well, they paid for those results. So I am proud of the fact that I've gotten through these certifications because I am not necessarily a good test taker, but this is the way. This is the way. If you have to have it to get hired at the gym you want to work at, then that's what this program is for. If you want to know actual anatomy, if you want to know actual programming, be able to talk to physical therapists and registered dietitians and, uh, people who have gotten their CSCS and are legit people in the fitness industry, then you're want to get the Show Up Fitness CPT because we speak their language and we actually know anatomy. So okay. Back to focusing, sorry. I wanna go over a little bit, muscles as movers. You wanna know you wanna know the anatomical locations. You wanna be able to speak the NASM language of agonists being the prime movers for a joint motion. So for example, the gluteus maximus for hip extension, that's gonna be your prime mover or your agonist. And then a synergist, which a synergist creates forces to assist prime movers, but are not intended as the primary force producer. So a NASM examples on this would be a hamstring complex and the erector spinae for hip extension. The erector spinae, if you know where that is, it is in your lower back. It's kind of a fascia, like a white looking muscle because it has a lot of fascia on it. And it is part of the core muscles. And we'll actually talk about, and what you need to know is the difference between the global muscles of the core and the local muscles of the core. And so NASM is going to talk about those, and you need to know where they are. Stabilizers, they support and stabilize the joints, while prime movers and synergists move through the entire muscle action spectrum to perform a movement. So example of stabilizers, they contract isometrically, the transverse abdominis, the internal obliques, and multifidus for hip extension. And for like, what are you talking about? This is in your book. Actually, I think it is chapter 16. It talks about the core muscles. And so you're going to want to know what those are, especially when we do get into progressions and regressions, because NASM divides them into, let me see, like core stabilization exercises with no spinal movement, strength exercises that have slight spinal movement, and then power exercises that have spinal movement. And if you want to know what those are, especially like triple extension, that's going to be in the 500s of the book, aka chapter 16, if you want to look in the portal. Juliana says, what are you talking about? Slow down. I'm sorry. I want to get through part of this so that we can get to the meat and potatoes of today. Basically, what you need to know is that muscles are movers, and you have agonists, antagonists. So the antagonists perform the opposite action of the prime mover. So you have agonist, antagonist, and then you have stabilizers and synergists. Okay. You might get a question on the exam that talks about where, or they'll identify an agonist as the prime mover, but they're asking you to identify an antagonist and want you to know whether it's an overactive or underactive muscle. When you know that, it helps you understand how you train a client in the OPT model, because you know which muscles need to be strengthened because they're weak and lengthened, or which muscles are taking over and are overactive, and they describe them as short and tight. Does that make sense? So everything that we've been talking about today is basically chapter 16 and 17, because those progressions and regressions that are identified using this language are going to be on page 528 through 555. And that's chapter 16 and chapter 17. So we're getting through this, and you guys are doing awesome. Stick with me. Maybe on another, let's see, is it right to generally assume that an antagonist muscle is the opposite muscle of an agonist muscle? So it performs the opposite action of the prime mover. Okay. So, and I can give you some examples of this in a minute. Especially when we are studying the overactive and underactive muscles. So we went over overactive and underactive muscles last week. I have the recording of that call. I'm going to send that to Chris today. There was a problem with Zoom. And I'm going to see if he'll put it in the Show Up Fitness online app, because we have recordings in there. But if you are part of level 0 and you're in the program, we have pre-recorded calls that go over all of that. So you are so welcome. All right, so we talked a little bit about global and local muscles. I'm going to let you guys look those up on your own. But NASM is going to want you to always choose stabilization endurance or phase 1 as the answer anytime you see the words proprioceptive enriched environment. Proprioceptive enriched environment. They are going to see that as phase 1 stabilization. And so any of those progressions and regressions in chapter 17, here's a really good example. A stabilization balance exercise with no spinal movement, balance reach is going to be an example of that. Okay. Another balance exercise is, in progressions and regressions of that, single leg balance into a single leg squat into a multiplanar hop with stabilization. Okay. Strength exercise with slight spinal movement would be the single leg squat. A power exercise with spinal movement would be like side jumps. Okay. And a Bosu ball, which NASM loves Bosu balls, that's going to be the most advanced balance progression. Okay. Okay. So an example of this, a question example that you might see is balance is an example of A, dynamic and neuromuscular efficiency. We talked about that earlier. B, balance is an example of static and dynamic. C, balance is an example of neuromuscular and poor. Or D, balance is an example of dynamic and proprioceptive. Which one do you think it is? I love how engaged you guys are, by the way. This is awesome. So we have all the answers here. It's actually A, dynamic and neuromuscular efficiency. So anytime you see balance, balance is going to be phase 1, right? So anytime you see neuromuscular efficiency, that's phase 1. So that's how you know it's A. What about this one? The proper progression from an AirX pad is to A, half foam roll, B, a balance beam, C, a single leg exercise, or D, a Bosu ball. A proper progression from an AirX pad is, Dianelle says D, Juliana says A, Brandon says D. It's D. It's a Bosu ball. Okay. Okay, so exercise progressions and regressions, just the general definition of this. Your progression means the level of difficulty is going up, and regression means the level of difficulty is going down. So you're basically going from easy to hard. And so progression, you're going from easy to hard. Regression is you're going from hard to easy. Okay. Some more progression examples within the core is a ball bridge to a ball crunch to a medicine ball pullover throw, which that is when you're leaning against an exercise ball and you have a ball in your hands and you're like leaning back and then you throw that ball. So you're on a ball and you're throwing a ball at the same time. A plyo exercise. So what does plyo stand for? Plyometric. Very good. So you have a squat jump with stabilization to a squat jump to ice skaters. Okay, that is plyo. The great thing about going into the portal, like if you're in chapter 16 and you're looking at like the core progressions and regressions, they start out with a set of exercises and that's going to be stabilization. The next set of exercises they list like floor crunch, a ball crunch, back extension, a knee up, cable rotation. Those are all going to be for strength. And then the last set that they give you is for core power. So they take you through the OPT model by grouping these exercises together and their core exercises, and they give you the progressions in groups. So what you could do is you could take a flashcard and you could say core stabilization on one side, and on the other side, you could list some of the exercises, and then you could do them individually. But it's up to you how you want to do that. They even give you pictures on what these look like, which some of them are laughable, like the ball, medicine ball, pull over throw. Ay, ay, ay. But I digress. Oh. And then chapter 17 is balanced training concepts. So they do the exact same thing for that as well. They talk about the proprioceptively enriched environment. They take you through how you should stabilize, and then also looking at the 5 kinetic chain points. So we actually have 10 kinetic chain points, but NASM only lists 5 for you. Do you guys know what they are? Mm-hmm. Yep, we got foot and ankles. Then what do we have? Knees. Hips. What else? Shoulders and thoracic spine. And then head and cervical spine. So I'm a mom and I kind of laugh because I learn in songs like head, shoulders, knees and toes. Right? So that always kind of helps me learn and remember the NASM ones. But when we talk about the hips specifically, NASM has a term that they use for the hips. And what do we call that? The LPHC. And so what does the LPHC stand for? Ah, so close, Susan. So close. lumbo. Julian says, just tell us. Lumbo-pelvic hip complex. So you might see a question on the exam that says, what does LPHC stand for? And they might give you 4 answers, and one of them's the right answer, and everything else looks ridiculous. Or they might switch some of the letters up, right? Or the words up for what the letters stand for. So you kind of have to know what it stands for, so it makes sense to them knowing the difference. Okay, so we talked about some of these. We talked about some of the core training progressions. Level 1, you're always focusing on stabilization throughout the spine and pelvis. Level 2 is, your exercises involve more dynamic, eccentric and concentric movements of the spine through a full range of motion. So you might see a reverse crunch to a ball crunch to a cable rotation. Level 3 of core training progressions, you're going to see you're going to improve the rate of force production or power and movement efficiency of the core musculature and extremities. So you can see the OPT model in this, and that if someone is focusing on stabilization, your core exercises are going to be focusing on stabilization. So floor bridge to a plank or a side plank to a bird dog. And those are the progressions from easy to hard. The power ones would be the ball, medicine ball, pull over throw to a medicine ball, soccer throw to a rotational chest pass with a medicine ball. And then you have balance progressions that they talk to you about. So the easy ones in phase 1 stabilization would be a single leg hip rotation to a single leg balance. Level 2 would be a single leg squat to a single leg RDL. RDL is Romanian deadlift. And then the power ones would be, like I said earlier, the multiplanar hop with stabilization. So if you want more examples, you can look on page 565 to 567, and that is going to be chapter 17 if you have the online portal, okay? And then they move to plyometric reactive training. So this is good for you to know because, you're going to see stabilization squat jumps holding for 3 to 5 seconds into squat jumps, and then ice skaters, which are lateral jumps, right? From one side to the other. And so they really encourage plyometric training because it reduces the risk of injury in competitive athletes. It increases the muscle size and limits the effects of sarcopenia. Do you guys know what sarcopenia is? Julianne says, no, tell us. So sarcopenia is, Nikki, you're onto it. It's age-related loss of muscle mass resulting in weakness and frailty in older adults. So this is a safe option for older adults to improve function. And you will see NASM ask you about special populations. A popular topic that I get people who are like, what? I didn't see this anywhere in the book. They ask you about prenatal clients or pregnant women. And so in the first trimester, the stage of pregnancy that they're in determines what kind of movement that they do. So the first trimester, according to NASM, is great for most types of exercises. The second trimester, they encourage women to be very cautious and limited. And the third, many exercises and assessments should not be done. For older adult clients, they might have limited strength and limited stability. So you'll want to regress both of these special populations. Overweight or obese clients, they might have a lack of strength or instability with a risk of falling. And then young kids, they might have limited strength and poor motor control. So due to the wide range of clients a fitness professional will work with, like you and me, it's important to recognize and implement. According to NASM, they want you to do assessment modifications with movement restrictions or safety concerns. So those are signs or symptoms that you want to look for Again, when you're looking at a client according to the overhead squat assessment, you are checking the 5 kinetic chain points and making sure that, you have looked at their heart rate. I'm trying to look and see what else NASM will want you to know. We've gone over a lot today, and you guys have done amazing. And I'm really impressed that you came already knowing a lot because we were able to cover a lot. So here's the deal. Every week we have this Zoom. And so if you're part of the level 0 for Show Up Fitness, it's $100 a month. I actually have a discount code Ashley25 that gets you $25 off your first month. What do you get with that? You get our on-demand app that has pre-recorded videos with the curriculum of everything that you need to know to pass your NASM. You also get these live tutoring calls with me. I also offer one-on-one tutoring. If you feel like that's something that you need, you can reach out to me, Ashley at showupfitness.com, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. I would love for all of us to follow each other on Instagram or Facebook if you want. There's my Instagram handle. I also have another one for my fitness brand. It's called Driven Fitness. You can find me there too. And then you can also reach out to me on Facebook. It's Ashley Kellum Garcia. I'm also on TikTok, all the things. But if you need the code for level 0 or level 1, it's Ashley25. Susan says, I saw you on TikTok. Yay, that's cool. I'm learning TikTok. It's kind of like this wild beast of a thing. There you get a lot of exposure to other people, but you don't necessarily have the capability of sharing links or graphics and images and stuff like that. So I usually direct people over to Facebook or Instagram if you want to chat with me and get certain graphics for things, because I like to send study materials as well. But I'm also releasing the my own study guide that is partnered with Show Up Fitness, an updated study guide, as well as a study guide for the CNC. So that is coming out soon. But we have an amazing podcast. We have our YouTube channel. We would love for you guys to listen to those resources because they're free and we want you to succeed. But if you want to listen to a podcast, send me or Chris info at showupfitness.com a screenshot of your 5-star rating of the podcast, and then we will send you the cheat sheet if you don't already have it. So we have lots of resources for you guys. Thank you so much for popping on today. Let's show up next week. We're going to be going over a new topic. And as always, I love to share the things that you guys need to know to pass. And I'm actually going to drop them. We call these the 7 topics to master, because I want you to feel so good about showing up here today and coming every week. If you guys study those 7 topics to master, you will pass this thing very quickly because it trims the fat and you don't have to be overwhelmed. Okay? Let's see. We did it. I'm looking at all of the things just to make sure that we got all of the progressions and regressions. I hope this was fun for you today. I hope we made it fun. This can be fun to study. So I'm going to open it up if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we will see you next week. I also have a study group on Facebook. It's called the Women's NASM Study Group. It doesn't have to be for only women, okay? I just know there were so many women like me and you who were looking for ways to pass, and I started that group a year ago, and we have 800 plus members. So there is the link to the Facebook group. If you're not already in it, come join me. Free resources. And if you need any tutoring, let me know. What chapter did you say goes over the progressions and regressions? Some of those exercises, I have no idea what they are. It's chapter 16 and chapter 17. And then it moves into the OPT model. Let's see. And chapter 18 is plyometric progressions and regressions. And then chapter 20 goes over the resistance training systems and starts going into the OPT model. So chapter 16 is core. Chapter 17 is balance. Chapter 18 is plyometrics. Chapter 19 is SAQ, so speed, agility, and quickness. Chapter 20 is resistance training, moving into the OPT model. Break it up into small sections, you guys, okay? Don't get overwhelmed with trying to know everything in those chapters. You don't have to read those chapters multiple times. Like in chapters 18 and 19, you might get a total of 1 to 3 questions on the exam. That's not something to stress over. So don't sweat it. You know what I mean? And then Juliana says, when would you have another Zoom for ACE CPT? We actually have a study guide for the ACE, but I can talk to Chris and we might be able to put something together for you, Juliana. Okay? Y'all go follow each other. I love it. Thank you guys so much. Y'all have a great day.